April 16, 1789, Washington, the man who was already half a monument, the first president-elect of the United States, wrote in his diary,
"About 10 o'clock, I bade adieu to Mount Vernon, to private life and to domestic felicity. And with a mind oppressed with more anxious and painful sensations than I have words to express, set out for New York with the best disposition to render services to my country in obedience to its call, but with less hope of answering its expectations."
Thus, St. George of America had begun his triumphal journey to New York to take the oath of office and deliver his inaugural address. Bells rang, cannon thundered, officials welcomed, cavalry escorted. Throngs on the highway blessed him. Alexandria, Baltimore. Approaching Philadelphia, he passed under an archway. At a signal, a crown of laurel was lowered over his head. Trenton. Less than 13 years ago, he had crossed the Delaware here, surprised the Hessians, been driven back between the fires of Cornwallis and the icy river, and made his midnight end run to Princeton, lighting up the black hours of the Revolution with a sudden blaze of victory. No Hessians now on the bridge over the Assunpink Creek, but peace, sunshine, a crowd, and a small band of musicians playing a march composed especially for the occasion. 9 years later, Joseph Hopkinson had set the words of Hail Columbia to the tune. Now it was the President's March. Now Washington, crossing the bridge on a white horse, draws rein and stops, as white-robed matrons, young ladies, and little girls with baskets of flowers block the roadway.
Welcome, mighty chief, once more. Welcome to this grateful shore. Now no mercenary foe aims against the fatal blow. Now no mercenary foe aims at the fatal blow. Virgins fair and matrons grave, those thy conquering arms did save, built for thee triumphal bowers, strew your heroes' way with flowers.
With pageantry, emotion, and melodrama, the people and their president perform for the first time the ritual of the investiture of leadership in American democracy. For the president, an adulation and an ordeal. No royal line bestows on him his executive powers, no elite. He will rise from the mass and return to the mass, striking attitudes of leadership, exhibiting on demand miraculous wisdom and foresight, moving with the grain of a free people into an ever more dangerous destiny. Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
The people of the United States have not failed. They have asked for discipline and direction under leadership. They have made me the present instrument of their wishes. In the spirit of the gift, I take it.
Harry S. Truman.
The peoples of the earth face the future with grave uncertainty, composed almost equally of great hopes and great fears. In this time of doubt, they look to the United States as never before for goodwill, strength, and wise leadership.
Dwight D. Eisenhower.
We must be ready to dare all for our country. For history does not long entrust the care of freedom to the weak or the timid. This is the work that awaits us all, to be done with bravery, with charity, and with prayer to Almighty God.
John F. Kennedy.
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Lyndon Baines Johnson.
A president's hardest task is not to do what is right, but to know what is right. Yet the presidency brings no special gift of prophecy or foresight. You take an oath, you step into an office, and you must then help guide a great democracy. A president does not shape a new and personal vision of America. He collects it from the scattered hopes of the American past.
The invention of the presidency is an experiment in a new relationship between a people and their ruler. Washington himself does not foresee this special relationship when he rides into Philadelphia May 13th, 1787, to take part as a delegate from Virginia in the Grand Federal Convention. Neither do Madison, Hamilton, Ben Franklin, nor any of the other revolutionary giants who have assembled to make the Articles of Confederation adequate to the exigencies of government. James Wilson, Pennsylvania delegate, has the notion of the portentous silver cord the convention will weave, linking in perpetuity the American people and their president. Friday, June 1st, the convention has settled down to business. Nathaniel Gorham, Massachusetts, chairman of the Committee of the Whole, advances discussion of the Virginia plan.
If there are no objections, we will proceed to the consideration of the next clause in Resolution Number 7. The mode of appointing and the duration of the executive.
Mr. Chairman.
The chair is pleased to recognize Mr. James Wilson of Pennsylvania.
Mr. President, I'm almost unwilling to suggest a mode of electing the chief magistrate for fear the gentlemen think it chimerical.
James Wilson is 44, born in Scotland, studious, a gambler in banking, shipping, and western lands, lawyer, scholar, neat in ruffled shirt and powdered wig, round lenses in spectacles.
I am for an election by the people. Resolution 7 as proposed provides that the executive be chosen by the national legislature. Why not let the people elect the first magistrate? New York and Massachusetts choose their executive in that manner.
George Mason of Virginia likes the idea, but thinks it impractical. Roger Sherman of Connecticut abhors it. The 66-year-old Connecticut Yankee is a pious, self-taught lawyer who had once been a cobbler.
And if there is any such thing as the essence of tyranny, surely it must lie in the absurd notion that the executive should be independent of the legislature. And if the people elect the executive, that is precisely what he will be. Independent.
Discussion of Wilson's idea is postponed. George Mason urges the Pennsylvania delegate to develop his ideas about popular election. The next day, June 2nd, James Wilson makes a more detailed proposal.
Let the states be divided into districts, and let qualified voters elect electors, who shall elect by ballot blank person or persons not of their own body, in whom the executive authority of the national government shall be vested.
Wilson's motion fails to specify the number of the executive. That has not yet been decided. Indeed, it had been Wilson the day before who had moved for a single executive. The delegates had received his motion in complete silence. All had looked to Washington. Then Roger Sherman had spoken.
Why fix the number at all? Let the legislature be at liberty to appoint one executive or more as experience might dictate. The legislature will be the best judges of the business which ought to be done by that executive.
Mr. Chairman.
Governor Randolph.
We are not meant to model a government after the British prototype.
The young governor of Virginia, Edmund Randolph, personable, a lawyer, former member of Washington's staff.
Mr. Sherman suggests that the executive, at the discretion of the legislature, could consist of more than one person. He wishes to make the magistracy dependent on the legislature. I, on the contrary, desire to strengthen the independence of the executive department. But I cannot see why the great requisite of the executive department, vigor, dispatch, and responsibility, cannot be found in 3 men as well as 1.
The question of the single executive would be settled fairly soon. But the answer to the question, shall the executive be elected by the national legislature or by the people, would continue to baffle the Grand Convention until 11 days before it ended. Today, in the 20th century, Congress might be electing the president, had it not been for James Wilson's stubborn belief that executive power should flow from all the people. In 1787, on June 2nd, Wilson's electoral proposal is buried 7 states to 2 with 1 state delegation divided. The convention in the following days goes on to other matters.
Mr. Chairman?
Benjamín Franklin.
I move that the executive be paid expenses but given no salary.
The sentimental star of the convention has written out a speech in support of his motion. But at 81, he's physically feeble, and James Wilson offers to read his remarks.
To read your speech for you if you wish.
That's very gracious of you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, what kind of men will strive for the executive preeminence if it is made profitable? That will not be the wise and the moderate, the lovers of peace and good order. It will be the bold and the violent, the men of strong passions and indefatigable activity in their selfish pursuits.
The 81-year-old Franklin speaks for himself on the question of an absolute veto for the executive. Franklin opposes the motion.
An absolute veto would undoubtedly lead to bribes and emoluments. I recall that under the proprietary government of Pennsylvania, the governor constantly made use of his negative to extort money. No good law whatever could be passed without a private bargain with him. Till at last it became a regular practice to have orders in his favor on the Treasury presented along with the bills to be signed so that he might actually receive the former before he signed the latter. When the Indians were scalping the Western people, the governor's concurrence in the means of self-defense could not be got till it was agreed that his estate should be exempt from taxation. So the people were to fight for the security of his property whilst he was to bear no share in the burden. This was a mischievous sort of check.
Alexander Hamilton of New York, small, lean, 32 years of age, a man of style, skill, ambition, and energy, also favors an electoral system. On the matter of the executive's tenure, he calls him the governor. He takes an even more radical position.
As to the tenure of office, let the governor be elected for life. If his term were limited, he would be ambitious with the means of making creatures. The object of his ambition would be to prolong his power. In case of a war, he would probably avail himself of the emergence to evade or refuse a degradation from his place. An executive for life has not this motive for forgetting his fidelity, and will therefore be a safer depository of power.
General Washington has not spoken to a single question, and to the very last day of the convention, he never will. The delegates have elected him president of the convention, and he presides solemnly in the chair or sits with the Virginia delegation. The first man put at the helm will be a good one, Dr. Franklin says. Everyone knows that the man from Virginia will be the first chief magistrate. On the question of a single executive, Washington votes aye. Once, just before a day's adjournment, the man who is to be president rebukes the delegates.
Gentlemen, I am sorry to find that some one member of this body has been so neglectful of the secrets of the convention as to drop in the State House a copy of our proceedings, which by accident was picked up and delivered to me this morning. I must entreat gentlemen to be more careful lest our transactions get into the newspapers and disturb the public repose by premature speculations. I know not whose paper it is, but there it is. Let him who owns it take it.
William Pierce, Georgia delegate, a modest, capable man of about 47, who later related the anecdote, told the sequel.
The general threw the paper on the table, bowed, picked up his hat, and quitted the room with a dignity so severe that every person seemed alarmed. For my part, I was extremely so, for putting my hand in my pocket, I missed my copy of the same paper. But advancing up to the table, my fears soon dissipated. I found it to be the handwriting of another person.
I declare.
It is something remarkable that no person ever owned the paper.
It is indeed.
Toward the end of June, the larger states, led by Madison, Hamilton, and Wilson, have already won popular representation for the first branch of the legislature. Now they insist on ramming through the same formula for the second branch. In the Georgian room, with the gray and white walls and the three immense windows on either side shut so that the heat is oppressive, tempers begin to fray. James Wilson from Pennsylvania, a large state, resumes his argument against an equal vote for the small states in the second branch.
Whenever a question should happen to divide the states in that manner, the rule of suffrage ought on every principle to be the same in the second as in the first branch. Or if the government be not laid on this foundation, it can neither be solid nor lasting. Any other principle will be local, confined, and temporary. Can we forget for whom we are forming a government? Is it for men or for imaginary beings called states?
Mr. President, an equal vote in each state is essential to the federal idea. It's founded in justice and freedom, not merely in policy.
Luther Martin, about 39, Maryland Attorney General, a notable drinker, red-faced, savagely devoted to the sovereignty of his small state.
Now, the states may give up their right to sovereignty, yet they had not and they ought not. States, like individuals, are in a state of nature sovereign, free, and equally independent.
If the president, please.
Elbridge Gerry, Massachusetts, counters Luther Martin. Gerry is 43, the convention's largest holder of continental securities, a major investor in Western lands.
States and the advocates of them are intoxicated with the idea of their sovereignty. Why, we never were independent states, are not now, and never can be. I lament the fact that instead of coming here like a band of brothers belonging to the same family, we seem to have brought with us the spirit of political negotiators.
Mr. Martin.
The small states will never confederate unless it can be done on just principles. Maryland cannot give up the equality of its vote without giving up its liberty. The proposition on the table is a system of slavery for 10 states.
Mr. Hamilton.
Nothing can be more preposterous than to sacrifice the rights of people composing the states to the artificial beings resulting from their composition. The smaller states say that if they renounce their equality, they renounce their liberty. The truth is, it is a contest for power, not for liberty.
Mr. James Madison.
Too much stress is laid, sir, on the rank.
Madison is 36, slender, medium height, usually dressed in black. The youthful delegate from Virginia, laboriously taking down his historic notes of the debates, is generally acknowledged to be the dominant spirit of the convention, a strong nationalist, and fiercely opposed to any compromise with the small states.
I entreat the gentleman representing the small states to renounce a principle which is confessedly unjust, which can never be admitted, and which, if admitted, must infuse mortality into a constitution which we wish to last forever. The states will run into total separation from each other, or they will enter into partial confederacies. Now, either event will be truly deplorable.
Mr. Bedford, Delaware.
The large states seek to aggrandize themselves at the expense of the small.
Gunning Bedford, Jr., corpulent delegate from Delaware, Attorney General of the tiniest state.
Their eyes. Will it be said that an inequality of power will not result from an inequality of votes? Give the opportunity, and ambition will not fail to abuse it. The whole history of mankind proves it. the small states will be ruined. I do not, gentlemen, trust you. We are willing to observe our engagements, but we will meet with the large ones on no ground but that of confederation. The large states, sir, dare not dissolve the confederation. If they do, the small ones will find some foreign ally of more honor and good faith who will take them by the hand and do them justice.
The states are deadlocked, 5-5. During the days of crisis, Dr. Franklin lays his gentle, patriarchal Quaker hand on the tumult of acrimony. The venerable philosopher rises, his famous double spectacles low on his nose, and addresses the president's chair.
Mr. President, the small progress we have made after 4 or 5 weeks' close attendance and different sentiments on almost every question is, methinks, a melancholy proof of the imperfection of the human understanding. I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? I therefore beg leave to move that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business, and that one or more of the clergy of this city be requested to officiate.
Pious Roger Sherman of Connecticut seconds the motion. Then Hamilton speaks.
Sir, Dr. Franklin's resolution might have been very proper at the beginning of these proceedings, but at this late date, it might bring on some disagreeable animadversions and lead the public to believe that the measure had been suggested by embarrassments and dissensions within the convention.
Mr. President, the alarm that might be excited outdoors for the state of things within.
Hugh Williamson, North Carolina, 52, a surgeon, mathematics professor, and theologian. His Irish mother had once been captured by Blackbeard the pirate.
Not justify any further omission. Gentlemen, the true cause of the past omissions, however, cannot be mistaken. The convention has no funds.
The motion is silently postponed. Franklin writes in his diary, the convention, except 3 or 4 persons, thought prayers unnecessary. 40 years later, an apocryphal account will record that Hamilton remarked that he did not see the necessity for calling upon foreign aid. The struggle between the large and small states grows sharper. General Charles Cotesworth Pinckney of South Carolina suggests that a select committee be appointed to solve the problem. Sherman of Connecticut agrees.
Such a committee is necessary to set us right. It seems we have got to a point that we cannot move one way or the other.
Mr. Martin.
This is merely another attempt at compromise. You must give each state an equal suffrage or the whole business is at an end.
Wilson also opposes the appointment of a committee.
A committee consisting of members from each state is utterly useless, gentlemen. And we've learned that sad lesson from our experience in Congress.
Madison is also opposed.
Any compromise that may be proposed by the committee could as easily be proposed here in the convention.
Mr. Gary.
I am for the committee. I pray you, gentlemen, consider our state if the Union should fail. Why, we should be without an umpire to decide controversies. What is to become of our treaties, our foreign debts? What of our domestic? We must make concessions on both sides.
Madison and Wilson cannot stem the tide toward compromise. The committee is appointed. While the committee labors, the Grand Convention adjourns to help Philadelphia celebrate Independence Day. Tuesday, July 3rd, the delegates visit Peale's Museum, take excursions up the Schuylkill River. Wednesday, July 4th, Washington, a Virginia Episcopalian, attends the Reformed Calvinist Church to hear a July 4th sermon. Then pomp, bell ringing, the salute of guns, and marching to fife and drum. Everywhere the public toasts.
The Grand Convention! May they form a constitution for an eternal republic!
The Pennsylvania Herald writes on its front page,
"With zeal and confidence, we expect from the Federal Convention a system of government adequate to the security and preservation of those rights which were promulgated by the ever-memorable Declaration of Independence."
James Wilson, amid the celebration, doesn't give much thought to his plan for the election of the executive by electors chosen by the voters. Why worry about how the president will be elected, Wilson reflects. Perhaps there may not even be a government of the United States.